For most of us growing up in the 80s, our introduction to horror was actually through VHS. So was that the kind of fruition of this story for you?
100%. I mean, VHS films were like my main gateway into getting into horror, like watching stuff like Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and The Mutilator and Blood Rage. There were so many of these oddball films that were just on VHS, in my teens that had not made it to DVD, and it now seems like they're ending up on Blu-ray for whatever reason, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I just grew up being absolutely obsessed with them. So, for my first feature, it just seemed like a very natural thing to try to recapture that.
So we've got a story here that's very much a family related story. It's rooted in family, but you've got this haunted video game, effectively board game. So tell us more about that, because just the whole idea of it sounds wonderful.
It was basically, it seemed like such an interesting thing because the VCR board game was, a very popular thing for a very short amount of time in the late 80s and early 90s, and it seemed like such a cool cultural artifact to use as an engine for a movie like this, where it's essentially a haunted house movie with some exploding heads and some gooey bits that come a little later in the film. But it was something that I was very surprised no one had done at this point, because it just seemed like such a no-brainer, and that was very much what attracted me to doing it. So.
And because it's interdimensional, did you have to think about the aesthetics and how to change them?
100%. I mean, if you watch the movie closely, you'll see the sort of lighting scheme ends up changing over the course of it during the nighttime, where it ends up being kind of like a more natural look in the first, act of the movie, and then as it goes on, it gets this more blue, sort of like Remy Harlan prison look, which is, that blue backlit thing we've all seen a million times in the 80s supernatural movies. And then we end up kind of introducing this, purple and blue lighting scheme, to fully immerse you in the world of the 1980s. So, yes, good pickup on that.
And you've got, I said before that there's this relationship also story going on. What was it about the relationship between two estranged brothers and an estranged father that you wanted to explore?
A lot of it just came from these films like Phantasm and, The Gate to an extent, even though they're not technically brothers in that. There's just this cool sort of, male bonding thing, and I think it's kind of fascinating. There's a lot of people I've met who've, lost a parent, and they end up, kind of mourning the relationship they didn't have with them. And it felt to me like there was some kind of rich, dramatic material in there to explore, so... That was the main sort of impetus behind it.
So tell us about the synopsis of the film.
Beyond the Gates is about two brothers who are searching for their estranged father, and in the process of this search, they find a haunted VHS board game that ends up opening a portal to another dimension inhabited by Barbara Crampton, and things go totally crazy and blood is shed, and it's really super fun. Lots of demons and extra dimensional terror.
There is something about VHS, isn't there, that we've just never fallen out of love with, have we?
I know, and I think it's because for me, growing up, that was how I got introduced to every kind of movie, and especially horror. I mean, that, for me, it was all about go to the VHS store and rent a horror movie. And so I think, when you grow up, then you go, oh, I want more, I want what I had when I was a kid. So.
And with regards to the character that you're playing, what was it about him that resonated with you?
Gordon it's a part that, unlike any that I played before, he's very quiet, he's very tense, he's very closed off. He's a recovering alcoholic, and he is really desperate to try and get over his past relationship with his father. And so what I loved about it is that, here's a horror film that has some deep emotional resonance and real character stuff going on, and that's all, thanks to Jaxon Stewart and Stephen Scarlatta, the writers of the film. They really did a great job.
And you're playing opposite a brother that's an estranged brother, isn't he? So, did you had to be careful about not probably building too much of a bond between you on set?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's interesting. Chase and I became really good friends over the course of the film, of shooting the film, and I think it just helped to cement the fact that even though we're estranged brothers, there's still a link that is at the root of everything, and I feel like that is how you really. I think that's how you really get into the idea of siblings and everything, because there is that bond that can't be broken, you know?
You're over here from the UK at FrightFest. Is that an exciting thing for you to be a part of?
It's amazing. It's amazing. I've always wanted to come to FrightFest, and this is my first time here, and it's just super fun. I mean, how could, it's great. You're standing here surrounded by other horror fans, and you're, drinking a beer and seeing cool movies. It's the best.
I imagine when you read this script, you couldn't put it down, could you?
It's a page turner. It's a terrific thing, and I love that it's such a moment in time that it conjures. In the mid '80s, it's the VHS video board game throwback kind of thing, and it's got the score, and it's got the look, and the saturated colors, and the camera work. And of course, I immediately wanted to play the character because I love playing villains. For a character actor, that's the most fun you can ever have. Stuart Gordon once told me, I think villains must be the happiest people on earth. Look how much they laugh. They're the happiest people, and they love what they're doing. And when you're playing a villain or an antagonistic character, it's like, from their point of view, they're the hero. They're on a heroic path. There's no the self-doubt that comes with moral quandaries or moral questions. It doesn't interfere with the hero's quest that each individual villain is on.
Well, it's interesting because I spoke to Richard Gere, and he says, when you play a villain, it's not for you to make a judgment call, whether they're good or bad. You just have to find the truth within the character.
That's quite right, and I think the secret to that is playing them from their own point of view. And as I say, most villains are cast in the hero's mold themselves, And I tend to love the characters like Elric and Beyond the Gates. It's like, you don't just want to kill people or mess with them. You want to kill them in fun, interesting ways. You want to enjoy it. You want to relish it. So to play the character who kind of is the catalyst who sells the haunted board game to the unsuspecting game players is great fun. It's the kind of thing you can really sink your teeth into. It's very arch, it's very specific. And when you're playing a secondary antagonist where you don't have a lot of screen time, every moment you want to make work. So everything from every turn to every eye movement to everything you do with your lips is very specifically mapped out. And I tend to, this and other characters like my character Dr. Hill in Reanimated the Musical, I tend to love playing characters that are a little bit predatory. Somewhere between I want to have sex with you, but I also want to eat you. And I'm not sure which one I want to do right now. Maybe a little bit of both. In whatever order, I'm not sure,
And I believe your sort of background is in theatre, yes. So to perform in front of camera, normally less is more.
Absolutely.
So to be able to adapt to minimalise your portrayal on screen, was that challenging for you when you're used to giving bigger performances?
That's definitely something you have to think about as a stage performer. I'm not just a stage actor. I was a professional opera singer for 11 years, so I worked in very big houses, opera, between 1,000 and 2,000 seats, a lot of them without a microphone. So when you're in opera, you're playing up here. You're playing to the top balcony. And so you have to keep your face up and you have to keep your eyes up. Everything is a little bit more deliberate and a little bit broader. So to find the truth of the character that you're also doing there, but to do it without the muscles in your forehead and to do it primarily just with your eyes, right? That's why it's all mapped out in advance. It's like there's a parallel to music in some of these dialogues that may seem simple at first, but have oodles of subtext. Like the music isn't the notes. The music is the space in between the notes. And I think for this kind of a character, most of what he's doing is in between the words, or it's playing against the words. So for me, it was particularly trying to keep everything close to deadpan, but still full of character, And
personally, what did you take away from being a part of the film?
I think right now is just euphoria. The experience, when you're making a smaller movie, then you don't know it's going to hit, you don't know it's going to get distribution or get into big festivals. When you're making a smaller movie, there's a sense of urgency and there's never enough time. For me, one of the lessons I've learned doing a handful of these, be happy with your first take because it might be your only take and it might be the take they use. Whether or not it's your best take. Some actors give their best work in their best take, some on their first, some it's their fourth. Be happy with your first one, work it all out in advance, because by the time you get on set with the director, they're not really going to have a lot of time to talk to you. They're going to be more concerned with the lighting and the camera and the blocking of it. So I can't say enough about Jaxon Stewart. I've worked with him. He works with an ensemble of people. Most of us have worked with him for several years now on small films and different projects he's developed. He's a phenomenal, we all knew he was a very talented writer, but to see him break out with such a wonderful eye and sense of this kind of cinema for his first movie was a thrill for all of us, and I couldn't imagine a better first movie for him.